Hi, my name's Jeremy Millar. I work for a company called ConsenSys, and this is going to be a relatively non-technical presentation on where we see the state of Metropolitan Ethereum in 2023 and what we're doing about that. So if we look back over the last 7-8 years, Ethereum has really developed out of the scaling trilemma, right? The trade-offs of scalability, trust, and decentralization. And it's not to say that those issues are largely solved, but they are well on their way to being solved. But the question is, why does this matter? Well, basic ledgers have already been demonstrated that for simplistic value transfers, we can do that. We can do that relatively effectively at relative scale. However, that doesn't unlock a set of Web3 use cases that go much beyond basic payments and trading. So if we look at what's happened, we can scale Ethereum, right? I mean, even with optimistic rollups, we're able to scale Ethereum into the hundreds of transactions per second, right? We're up sort of 2 to 3x over where Ethereum mainnet is, just through the use of relatively primitive EVM hacks, right? Which is all most of the current optimistic L2s really are. You know, and what that means is we are seeing, even through the winter, TVL continues to increase into something that's quite sizable, right? But what's more important behind the scenes is the ability to, you know, if you look at Vitalik's sort of 5-stage roadmap for scaling Ethereum, is we're seeing progress on multiple fronts in parallel. And to take them through, you know, obviously, you know, in the context of being here at the StarkWare sessions, you know, there's tons of work going on around zero knowledge. Now, the work we do at ConsenSys mostly focuses on, well, in terms of our own technical development, building a ZK EVM, though in terms of our products, we support, and we plan to support, arbitrary technologies. You know, in addition to that, we're seeing, you know, as we saw in the Celestia presentation, you know, modularity and the separation of consensus, data, execution, and settlement into varying layers as something where there is lots of activity and a variety of approaches being tested, none of which where we really know where things will land, right? Like, we don't actually know what a ZK EVM layer 2 will look like. Let alone what that'll look like with the additional layers of modularity. And then in parallel with that, you know, we also have these app-specific chains that are going on, whether it's Polygon supernets or what people are doing around gaming, which are taking, you know, sort of existing technologies and saying, if we apply these in narrower use cases where we constrain the design to address a narrower set of problems, what can we achieve, right? And so, you know, when we go and look at the ecosystem, we really think that there's the focus that we see, if you actually go and dig into all the projects that the big L2s and the big ecosystems are doing, really focus around zero knowledge and modularity, right? And what's going to happen when we get there. So, you know, and the answer, of course, is going to be that we are going to unlock high throughput, high data intensive applications, which is where we think the value really comes from. So we've sort of proven that even with our relatively primitive scale capabilities, that DeFi will work. But what we're seeing, you know, regardless of where you look, is the desire to go into bigger and broader use cases. In addition to the things that get the headlines from large brands, if you look at something like trying to run a large-scale event in a metaverse, right? If you actually practically try and go and run a 5,000 to 10,000 person event in Decentraland, what you see is very, very low levels of transactions relative to the number of people that attend. And that in part is because of the throughput that's available doesn't yet support the types of use cases people want, right? But there is clear market demand to try and push the envelope out further and get there. And so, you know, in particular, and if you think back to the prior slide, you know, 60% of VC capital went into gaming last year, if you narrow it down and to look at our space, right? And that's why we're seeing sort of app-specific chains emerging alongside sort of the more R&D and hard computer science problems that are going into modularity and into zero knowledge. And similarly, we see things like lens scaling, the ENS and identity reputation systems, plus DAOs. All of these use cases currently start to look like a combination of a Web 2, Web 3 mashup rather than a pure Web 3 application, right? And so if you think about what the architectural requirements are to build, say, a social network at scale, you will need things like data persistence, right? Where are you going to store all the images, right? How are you going to do fast real-time messaging, right? What are you going to do if DAOs really become the way we all work every day? Well, 30 transactions per second won't cut it. So what we're doing at ConsenSys is we believe that there is a positive feedback loop between trying to scale out developer infrastructure and user access. And so that there's a feedback loop that happens between providing infrastructure that will work at scale and enabling users to have seamless access to it, right? So we really focus on two products, Infura and MetaMask. And so what we do, for example, in the layer 2 world is we provide RPC endpoints to all of the major L2s that then allows us to provide the network access inside of MetaMask, right? So if the more and more capable we are at adding capabilities at the network layer in Infura, the more and more networks we can provide in MetaMask. The other part that's really important to us isn't just continuous innovation, but it's permissionless innovation. So how do we enable both Infura and MetaMask to become permissionlessly extensible? So with MetaMask, it's through the MetaMask Snaps framework, and I think Alex Jupiter isn't here, but I think he's giving a talk on Snaps somewhere in this event. And then with Infura, we've announced Xfura, which is our efforts to decentralize Infura to allow multiple hosting applications, which we have here. And so so if you federate this out, right? So the goal here is to provide, if you allow for modularity, then how do you federate? And so we want to see other members of the ecosystem be able to take our products, which have achieved, substantive scale, and be able to add to them, as opposed to having us restrict them and build for our own purposes. One of the areas that we're probably most excited about, and we are not the only company in the world that's doing work on this, is around ZK EVMs. And our goal, there are three major and probably a dozen total ZK EVM projects out there. From our perspective, it's really not possible to say today who is actually furthest ahead. And that's because most of the ZK EVM implementations today have gotten one bit of it right. And sure, you might be able to build out, the opcodes and what have you. But if you go and compare, say, Scroll and what we're doing and what Polygon's doing and Matter Labs, and go and look at them, you'll find that one will be better at this versus that. So one will be better at circuits, but won't have a very efficient prover, right? The thing that we did that's particularly striking is the ability to do hash functions efficiently, right? The EVM loves hash functions, and they're kind of expensive to do in a traditional. They're expensive to do in most ZK implementations, and we figured out a way of solving that. But I think if we take a big step back, we're not here just to solve theoretical computer science problems, right? Really, what we're trying to figure out is how to build Web 3. And Web 3 is going to require an overall computer architecture that allows us to have the ability to build large-scale applications that can rival and supplant Web 2. And that's going to take us several more years to get there. But if you look at the evolutions that are going around the metropolitan Ethereum ecosystem, there's clear evidence that we will get there, and hopefully faster than anyone anticipates. Okay. So with that, I'm happy to take a few questions. I'm also happy to go for lunch. Oh.
Yeah. Thanks. Great talk. So I know that stablecoins are also a very hot topic, especially with onboarding. Developing nations are looking into it as well. How do you see that playing out with regards to just the broader ecosystem and landscape for crypto?
So if you look at MetaMask downloads, so we don't track user data in MetaMask, right? But if someone downloads, but we can see when someone downloads a piece of software where the download's coming from, right? The highest growth areas geographically for MetaMask tend to be emerging economies. So Nigeria, Thailand, the Philippines, India. So I don't think it's a question. So it's great that we can go out and build stablecoins and solutions that go and target people. But what's happening, I think from a practical reality is if you don't have access to anything and then something is available, you're going to go and try it. So sure, like stablecoins are great and they help a lot, but that onboarding in underserved financial economies is happening with or without it because the need is so great. Next question.
Is there, between the different ZK EVMs, do you think the main determining factor for which projects will reach to there will be first to market, or is there different throughput or price aspects?
So right now, the goal in the ZK EVM market is to win the marketing competition. So look, if you look at what happened in ETH2 clients, right? There is a big network effect of being first. There is clearly a big network effect of getting first, which is why people are announcing mainnets with products that are not feature complete, right? So we don't really know how ZK EVM L2s will actually work. Like we won't. And we get to go and have these discussions with all the other people that are building them. And should it be one standard and allow us to run, multiple ZK VMs on some collaborative L2, or are people going to build app-specific chains, or will you build it, into a wallet or into a DEX? We don't know the answers to that. So what's happening is everyone's announcing mainnets in order to try and achieve what you were saying, which is to be first to market, whether or not the product's done, right? It's a very traditional hack. Back in the 90s, I used to say, if you put it into PowerPoint, you've implemented it in software, right? But that is where we are. Like there is a very hard set of technical problems to solve, right? That are being solved in the context of a much larger set of scaling solutions for Ethereum, right? Like modularity, separation of the layers, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's this desire to be first to mainnet, for sure. And that is about trying to win market share in the marketing war, regardless of who has the best technical solution. The follow-up question, of course, is when token, but I think we have time for one more question. And with that, lunch.